What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Happy to be back. I wasn't here on Friday because I had a sty on my eye, but enough about that. Let's talk about what's coming up on today's show. 2 hours of goodness. Myles Garrett staying put in Cleveland. The trade that was to be will not be. So we're going to talk about that. Plus, DK Metcalf being traded. Does this mean we're having a complete rebuild in Seattle? We will discuss. And LeBron James has a bit of a tender groin. He's going to be out for 1 to 2 weeks. We also saw Luka holding his back. Oh, my God. Injuries galore for the Lakers. We'll talk about all that and more. Some great guests coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., as mentioned, Jesse Cofield back from her eye sty experience this last weekend. Got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday here, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the GoJo and Golic YouTube channel. Subscribe and hit the bell on that. Make sure you're ready to go. Jesse mentioned guest Matt Harmon from Yahoo Sports, fantasy football writer and analyst, and the creator of Reception Perception. Great tool for digesting and figuring out who is actually playing the wide receiver position well and why. Going to help us as a flurry of wide receivers have changed teams in some important spots. One of the biggest trades of this last weekend. So he'll join us in hour number 2. Very excited to talk about him. And Dad, I was excited to talk about NFL free agency this week. And in theory, we will get more deals that come out. There are still free agents left on the table, still plenty of teams with money left to spend, and that quarterback named Sam Darnold that hangs in the balance. But man, this weekend, it felt like we got a lot of the fun stuff out of the way in trades and players re-signing to their own teams. It was a flurry of NFL news over this weekend.
Is amazing the amount of news. And by the way, legal tampering starts today. So today is when all this, the like news, free agency starts along with the new league year, March 12th, Wednesday. So that's when true free agents can sign. But legal tampering starts today because everybody illegally tampered all the time. And so they just made a 2-day legal tampering window, which of course is not enough because people have been tampering since day one. So it's really kind of ridiculous. Deals are going to get done. You really have to get caught red-handed to get your wrist slapped for it. Bottom line is, like you said, there was an absolute flurry of things that happened, obviously with big names, Josh Allen, Myles Garrett, DK Metcalf that we're going to get into, but a ton of signings. It is pretty wild with what the league just kind of says, no, you can't do this, yet it's still done. And I mean, the amount of money that is going out, again, makes these NFL players feel good until NBA free agency hits and they see that money go out to where they feel like paupers again. But boy, the money is the non-quarterback money list is changing almost daily of the highest level there.
It is pretty impressive. And for the folks in college football, the coaches especially, who gripe constantly about the tampering that goes on there, it's like that old PSA. I learned it by watching you. Everyone in college is just like, they tamper in the NFL all the time. They even tried to make a window for tampering, and people still blew right past those stop signs and straight into the 11 arms of money. And, Dad, you mentioned a couple of the biggest deals that we should set the table with here if we're going to go in order of the biggest bank taking the smallest bank. Well, Josh Allen is your clear winner from over this weekend, who, by the way, on such a tear this year. The guy is getting ready to marry the movie star love of his life, was the NFL MVP this year, and is now the proud new owner of a 6-year, $330 million deal with $250 million of guaranteed money. He had 4 years left on the extension that he signed, and Buffalo said, we're going to rip that up and just replace it with this brand new 6-year extension. He is now signed with them and through the 2030 season. He'll be 34 at the end of that. And, Dad, kind of like the Mahomes deal, where you look at this and go, all right, he has set a new mark now. He has been guaranteed more money than any player in NFL history with $250 million guaranteed. He also, in the first 4 years of this deal, will be paid out $220 million guaranteed, which is an NFL record, just topping Dak Prescott, who makes about $219.5 in the first 4 years of his deal. So he found a way to be a record setter in all those ways. And then you look over this. This now the second longest deal signed behind Mahomes when he signed the 10-year deal, and it averages out to about $55 million a year. So didn't jump it up that much, doesn't eat up a huge percentage of the cap relative to other quarterback contracts. This already feels like a bargain for the Buffalo Bills in the ways that it should when you know what you have at a premium position, and the Bills went out there and did what they needed to do with that.
This is great foresight. This is just great foresight. And by the way, the top guaranteed contracts now are Josh Allen at $250 million, the horrific Deshaun Watson deal where he was guaranteed his entire contract of $230 million, Dak Prescott at $229.5 million, and Joe Burrow at $219 million. Those numbers are just going to keep going up as quarterbacks sign deals. But listen, Josh is again. This is foresight. This is getting ahead of. This is, in the last 2 years, the salary cap bumped up $50 million. This is getting your ducks in a row. This is, and I'll say it right now, if the Buffalo Bills get anywhere near the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, Brandon Beane, their GM, is going to be the executive of the year, because it's not always about free agents that you bring in or trades that you made. It's about players that you keep. And they not only signed Josh Allen to $330 million over 6, they signed their top pass rusher, Greg Rousseau, to a 4-year, $80 million deal this offseason. Terrell Bernard, their linebacker, 4 years at $50 million. And Khalil Shakir, their main receiver, 4 years and $53 million. And Josh Allen. They did all 4 of those this offseason. This is foresight. This is setting your cap number. This is getting ahead of the equation. This is knowing where you are money-wise to continue to build your team. What a great job by Brandon Beane and the Buffalo Bills.
Well, and the Josh Allen one, to me, like, this is easy. This is obvious. At the end of last season, Josh Allen was the 14th highest quarterback in terms of average annual value at $45 million a year. And they said, our guy just won an MVP, and we believe internally he's probably going to keep getting better the way that he has. And so why don't we go and pay him well now? And Josh talked about this before the season, was not concerned. Like, this is one where everyone involved knows the deal. There are some deals, Dad, I concede it's difficult to look and try and forecast what this player is going to be, how much of the results are based on our scheme or our play caller and all these other variables you have to consider. Sometimes it's easy, and some players you just know. And the Buffalo Bills are fortunate that Josh Allen makes it really easy. He's not a quarterback like Brock Purdy where you've got to hem and haw, because sometimes the ability and the production, where he was, the leverage that you have, all don't add up in the ways that you want to. Josh Allen is one of these super weapons at quarterback, and so you pay him accordingly. And on down the list, that's going to apply and be the one that starts to measure up when we talk about a guy like Jamar Chase in the market here, trying to be the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, the way Cincinnati has told him he could be. A guy like Micah Parsons, who at defensive end is one of those sure things. Dad, that's why I lumped them in together. I shouldn't say from the highest paid non-quarterback. We'll get to that with the Myles Garrett contract here. but it's paying a sure thing at a premium position. And right now in the NFL, wide receiver is treated like a premium position. Pass rusher has always been a premium position. And so not getting to those guys sooner and not making sure that those obvious answers to the questions you're trying to answer as a franchise are paid is a mistake. And it's highlighted when a team like Buffalo goes out and makes it look easy like this.
And I'll be interested in Buffalo talking about wide receivers. You know, do they go get themselves another wide receiver? Again, they paid Khalil Shakir, who's the leading receiver on their team, Greg Rousseau, the leading sacker on their team, Terrell Bernard, the second leading tackler on their team, as well as Josh Allen. But now they know where they stand cap-wise. Can they build more? Do they need more weapons, you know, at the wide receiver position with some wide receivers still available while some going off the market? The next leading receiver after Khalil Shakir's 76 receptions was Curtis Samuel with 31, Keon Coleman with 29. So, you know, they're probably going to look to bolster that a little more, but at least they know where they are money-wise to go ahead and do it. So just really an impressive job of something they didn't have to do now, but something they knew they were going to have to do. So why not do it now? Because your quarterback is, for the most part, when you have a good one, is going to be your highest percentage of your cap and most valued player. So why not set the mark or have the mark set with him? That way you know where you are with the trickle-down theory.
Yeah, they bet this year that Josh Allen could be the reason their offense moved, and they were right. They got rid of Stephon Diggs. They orged the offense around Josh Allen, and all he did was win the MVP and get them the 2 seed in the AFC. And right now they look like they can beat everybody but Kansas City, and maybe that's more mental and physical at this point. And that's a hump they're going to have to worry about, but you pay for proximity to the prize. And right now the Bills have been close and will continue to be so long as they have Josh Allen, that offensive line, and some of the key pieces that you mentioned were re-signed there. That's easy. Boy, Dad, the other biggest money that came out this weekend seemed like it was a hard road to get there. The Cleveland Browns agreed to a record contract extension that averages $40 million a year, including $123.5 million guaranteed for Myles Garrett, the man who last time on Dragon Ball Z was seen saying, "It's not about the money. This is about my legacy, and I don't want to hang out here and lose more games with the Cleveland Browns, go through another rebuild. I want out of here. I want a meeting with ownership. I want to get gone." And they just decided, no, we're going to pay you more money than God. That whole deal where Max Crosby was just the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, we're going to blow that out of the water by like $5 million a year. And we're going to make you realize that, hey, for $40 million, I can be happy anywhere, losing any amount of games. And that seems to be the takeaway for me on this one, Dad, is it's always about the money. And for enough of it, you can be unhappy and lose games. See Mike Trout anywhere on this earth.
Well, I think it's about the money, but I also think that after Myles Garrett couldn't talk to Haslam, who denied having a meeting or wouldn't have a meeting with him and send him to Andrew Berry, the GM, I also, quite honestly, Mike, think that they relayed to Myles Garrett, we're not going to trade you. And again, the team has the power here. The only power the player has is to sit. And I won't even say sit for a year because you don't get that year and you don't move any closer to free agency. So sit for the first, I think it's 10 weeks that you have to report by to count the year for you. So I really think it was the Browns solidifying there. We're not trading you. We're not trading you. So let's come to another conclusion here. And that conclusion now is the highest paid non-quarterback, which Myles Garrett deserves. He's now the highest paid non-quarterback. He passed Max Crosby, who passed Justin Jefferson, who passed Nick Bosa. Now, Micah Parsons is going to probably pass Myles Garrett. TJ Watt's up after next year. I don't think TJ Watt will. Trey Hendrickson's looking for a new deal. I don't think Trey Hendrickson's going to do that. I think the only one, and I think because of the age, because Micah is only 25 and Myles is 29, and Micah has put up incredible stats, Micah may pass Myles. I think that's the only one on the horizon that possibly could. But, Mike, I really think that was part of it. I think it was the Browns saying, we're not trading you. And quite honestly, I mean, I think technically that was a mistake because they're not going to – I think they're going to have a tough time winning in the next couple of years. So why not get what you can get from Myles Garrett? But I think from a public look standpoint, you're trading away your best player. You are truly starting over when you get rid of your best player to make the Browns fans throw their hands up and just say, what the hell are we doing? When that may have been the better thing to do and the smarter thing to do, considering where this team is.
Yeah, Myles Garrett, the money's going to help. That's what the money's for, was tailor-made for this situation. Because you're right, they're not going to be a good football team anytime in the near future, I don't think. And this could have been a great opportunity to recoup the kind of resources that could help get you closer to a better football team and out from under the colossal weight of the mistake you made at quarterback. But instead, they decided, for any number of reasons, and maybe it was sheer stubbornness, maybe like you said, Dad, it was, hey, we got to put butts in seats, and this signal to our fans that we really are going to go tank this thing the right way isn't one that we all want to get down with. But either way, this is a deal that, from that standpoint, I think was ill-advised. Myles Garrett, absolutely worth the kind of money you're going to throw at him. The guy is a true space alien playing football. There are not a lot of human beings on Earth that can do the things that Myles Garrett can. The production has been there, and so it is an easy payday for them. Even if I think strategically it is a mistake for where they're at with their franchise, and it's not going to net them a whole lot in the way of wins, but it's going to put Myles Garrett on an island, and round and round we go. Dad, the big takeaway I had was what you just brought up. The Dallas Cowboys, for sitting on their hands, now get this as another data point added to the pile for the edge rusher market, the highest paid non-quarterback market, in a way that feels idiotic when Micah Parsons has been out on State Street on his own platform saying since last year, I don't need to be the highest paid defensive player. I want to get this deal done soon so that we can go out and be active in free agency. The player has displayed a willingness to come to the table and get a deal done. And in Dallas, we know, because a lot of times we're always like, well, we don't know what's said behind closed doors. Maybe offers have been put on the table, yada, yada. Dallas has a well-worn history of making stuff harder than it needs to be. And in this situation, like it has with all these other ones, it's going to end up costing Jerry Jones more money when he eventually does what he always does and acquiesces to paying the player.
It's amazing. It's just they keep doing the same thing over and over again. Yes, they pay their top talent and they pay them well, but in like this, you're exactly right. They're going to have to pay him more than they would have had to pay him last year, without question. See where the market went. It was Nick Bosa at $34 million a year, the top non-quarterback. Then it was Justin Jefferson at 35. Then it was Max Crosby at 35.5. You could have had Micah for that area if you'd signed him last year. Now it's Myles Garrett at 40. And quite honestly, Micah Parsons has every right to ask for that and more, and to go a dollar above. Now, whether he will or not, let's put it this way. He'll be close to it. If he's not the top non-paid quarterback, he'll be second. Without question, he'll be second. So you're exactly right. It just continues to cost Jerry Jones the way he does business. You just see Buffalo getting ahead of. Again, the Josh Allen blows your mind, but the four other, leaders of their team, they re-signed as well. And here's Dallas just kind of sitting on their hands waiting.
And Dallas, while last year was a down year, had been winning plenty of games. Like the Las Vegas Raiders, who signed Max Crosby to a deal, don't even have a bevy of wins to point to. They just knew, hey, we probably need to sign the good guy to a contract. And so what do? They got him at about $5 million a year less than the Browns just had to money whip Myles Garrett to make sure he felt good about staying in Cleveland for. Like, think about that. If the Cowboys had signed this a week ago, they could have beat both of these, and they could have been paying him that $35.5 million that Max Crosby was now getting paid. Like, I don't mean to make everything about the Cowboys. I understand people have their frustration with coverage, but it's just the obvious takeaway with all of these is, Dallas, what the hell are you doing?
So true. And you know the biggest irony from the Myles Garrett deal? Myles Garrett was seeking a trade, said, I want to be out. I want to go win. I'm seeking a trade. I want to trade. I want to trade. This contract includes a no-trade clause for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way.
How about that?
Yeah, and go ahead and hand him the keys to lock himself in the house now if you're Myles Garrett, which is incredible.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, congratulations. I mean, the two biggest deals that went out this weekend, one in Josh Allen, a guy who loves Buffalo, has been a part of winning in Buffalo, wants to stay in Buffalo, and now gets to at a price that makes him feel the love for being currently the best player in the NFL as the reigning MVP, so said by the voters. And congratulations to Myles Garrett, who said, all right, I want out of here unless you guys are willing to pay me such an ungodly sum of money that you can ease the pain of all the losses that are likely going to still pile up for them. Congrats to both. Coming up next, we explore a much more complicated transaction as DK Metcalf is now a Pittsburgh Steeler. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. So much NFL news over the weekend. So we also found out DK Metcalf was traded to the Steelers. Seahawks fire sale, sending everybody away. Guys, what do you think this means? Are we completely, definitely, for sure in a rebuild in Seattle? And then what does this do for the Steelers to acquire DK Metcalf? I know it's kind of one of those questions. I think I know what you're going to say.
Well, I guess it depends because this has a bunch of different angles to it, Dad, and a bunch of different pain points here. So I want to start off with the DK Metcalf to Pittsburgh and what Pittsburgh is going to get out of him before we revisit the larger question of Seattle, because Seattle, that being tied to not only DK on the move, but Geno Smith on the move and the decision there, a quarterback, that's also going to lead to another big decision that a quarterback has to make this offseason. But DK and going to Pittsburgh now is in line for a 5-year, $150 million extension. He had 1 year and 18 left on his contract in Seattle. We knew that was the source of a bunch of consternation. He would now be one of 7 wide receivers in the NFL to be making more than $30 million a year. And while most people believe maybe he's on the lower end of that, he's still a guy that was up for a deal is on the right side of 30, and a place in Pittsburgh that has desperately needed help at wide receiver now in theory is getting it right now. For Pittsburgh, this is also not something they do. Patrick Queen last year had been the highest paid non-Steeler contract, the highest paid free agent deal in franchise history until now. And so, Dad, I guess from that standpoint, right off the bat, Arthur Smith in this offense, get a receiver in DK Metcalf that I know last year was a little bit down. That MCL injury in week 7 looms sort of large as a real break in his production for the year. But in general, he's been a receiver that outperformed a lot of what people thought about him after combine testing, has been incredibly productive, and really became, by the end of the season, maybe the 1B wide receiver in that Seattle room to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who had come on really strong. Do you think that this is a good move for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Just baseline there.
Listen, Pittsburgh needed to get some weapons. They have George Pickens, and we'll see if George Pickens is still there. But you need, now I know the Arthur Smith offense is based basically on running, but they're going to need to throw the ball well, and they need receivers to do that. George Pickens, who is certainly questionable with effort at times, there's no doubt about that. But at 6'3", 200 pounds, what a target he is. And Metcalf at 6'3", 6'4", 240 or 235, whatever he is. I mean, these are two big receivers if they are both on the team. I'm a fan of DK Metcalf. I like him. I like what he does. I like his production. But it is a couple of wild card personalities that Mike Tomlin, who is used to not working with personalities, though over the last couple of years he has, and having to do that. But the bottom line is they need more weapons, right? I mean, the tight end Freiermuth led with 65 receptions last year. I think that's because Pickens only played 14 games, was only 6 receptions behind him. He would have led. But they need weapons. I mean, no matter how much you want to run in your offense, you need weapons in the passing game. So, yeah, I mean, I like the trade for DK. Remember when the asking price was a 1 and a 3? When Seattle was looking for a 1 and a 3, and everybody just kind of snickered at that, and it turned out to be a 2 and a swap of 6th and 7th round picks. So the price dramatically dropped, which you knew it was going to. Again, you can ask for whatever you want. Yeah, we want a 1st and a 3rd. Okay, once you get away from that and settle down and everybody stops laughing, we'll go ahead and trade for what the real value is. So I like the fact that Pittsburgh picked up a wide receiver, and this is a heavy wide receiver offseason. And $30 million a year, though. I mean, he is younger. He's not an old receiver, that's for sure. But $30 million a year seems to be the going rate now, doesn't it?
Well, and the Steelers have money to pay. The 6th most available cap space going into this weekend, and this was always a position that people thought they would have to spend on, and maybe you had to spend a little more because remember the reports DK Metcalf wanted to go somewhere warm. Pittsburgh, decidedly not warm, so that goes by the wayside as he heads to the Steel City as a part of this trade. And Dad, it's one of those moves where, yes, this is probably an overpay relative to overall where he sits in the wide receiver landscape, but he's still a very good receiver and has consistently been one of the better ones in the NFL for the last 6 or so years. And so you take that and you run with it if you're Pittsburgh. The question there is going to loom at quarterback, and that's where the other move that Seattle made comes into play this weekend. Because in addition to trading DK Metcalf and releasing Tyler Lockett, they also dealt Geno Smith, their starting quarterback, to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 3rd-round draft pick. And, Dad, this was the one that really set off the alarms in my head. Now, I spent all of this last year doing a weekly hit for Seattle Sports Radio, so I watched more Seahawks football than I had in a while. And Geno defenders, Dad, will point out, boy, that man did a lot with very little protection up front last year. Yes, the turnovers jumped precipitously, and yes, he probably hasn't been as good as he was since the, wrote me off and I didn't write back comeback player of the year season that he authored a few years and a few offensive coordinators ago. But, man, he made chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what from time to time. The Sam Howell experience at the end of the year really should have shined a light on just how much Geno was offsetting with his play. But he is 34 years old, Dad, and this franchise at one time turned away from a 34-year-old, more proven veteran quarterback in favor of a little bit of uncertainty at the position, and they did get the last laugh in dealing Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos and what happened after that with Geno Smith at the helm. So I'm a bit conflicted, Dad. My initial gut reaction was this is a little bit too risky for my taste, considering I thought Geno Smith still played the position very well, represented an upgrade at that position that would allow you to go out and attack offensive line as the primary need in free agency, instead of now having to fish around in a quarterback market that really has one big fish and then a bunch of guppies swimming around in the pond.
Yeah, and I mean, Geno Smith you're right, kind of made chicken salad. He broke the franchise record for passing yards, completion rate, with an offense that O-line got banged up. There was really no running game. Completed 70% of his passes, threw for 4,300 yards. Did have 15 interceptions. So that was a bad mark. And from the reports and the understanding is that he wanted $40 to $45 million a year. As you said, he's got 1 year left on his $31 million at $31 million. Wanted $40 to $45 million, and the thought was Seattle wasn't going to pay that, so they traded him. But the reports say Seattle did offer him between 40 and 45, but on a 2-year deal. So did Geno Smith want more than a 2-year deal? Again, he's 34. Did he want more than a 2-year deal with more guaranteed money of the 2-year deal between 40 and 45 that Seattle supposedly offered? We don't know how much of it was guaranteed. So it seems like Geno wanted more, either more guaranteed money, more years, whatever. It'll be interesting what Vegas does, because Vegas picks up the whole $31 million, and it's the last year for Geno Smith. Do you extend him, or do you just say this is going to be a bridge guy and we're going to start with a brand new quarterback next year? At 30, and this year cost us $31 million. Or do you try and do a short extension with Geno Smith that doesn't cost you a ton of money? But if Geno turned down 2 for 40 to 45 with Seattle, why would he take that with Las Vegas? So it's going to be interesting of where Vegas goes with this. If they have, because you're right, Geno Smith, he salvaged his career in Seattle. 6 years, he definitely salvaged his career. But can he continue that in Vegas, where Vegas still has a bunch of holes to fill? But we knew this quarterback carousel was going to start, and it started with Stafford not being traded, staying with the Rams. So that started a whole, movement of quarterbacks. This one, I don't think a lot of us saw coming, but now it opens the door for Seattle needing a quarterback. Obviously, Pittsburgh, the Jets, the Giants, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on of who needs quarterbacks. And there's really only one younger available free agent quarterback out there with, some fingers crossed, and that's Sam Darnold. The rest are aging or aging and coming off injury.
So here's my thing. First off, love this for the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll talk to Fitzy tomorrow, hopefully. They've got to be doing backflips there, because now an organization that got a great offensive weapon in Brock Bowers last year is going to add, I'm sure, at running back or receiver in the draft this year, has a quarterback who is a competent adult in the room. Say what you want about the high-end production. Geno Smith can still go out there and play that position at a higher level than they've seen in Las Vegas in what feels like a while now. And so they've been wandering around in the wasteland. Someone just handed them water. We'll see how expensive that water ends up being, whether it's Dasani or whether it's, I don't know an expensive brand of water offhand, but one of the expensive brands of water in the hotel room you're not supposed to touch. Dad, on the other side of this, Seattle, again, my initial reaction was they got the last laugh with Russell Wilson. I feel like they're pushing their luck with this decision. Maybe the money and the things behind the scenes complicated that, but now, boy, oh boy, how history tends to repeat itself, because what was widely reported and what they're banking on, it seems, after that was Sam Darnold. And if a franchise knows how to take a former first-round reclamation project that failed with the New York Jets and make it a competent quarterback in recent memory, hey, it's the Seattle Seahawks who just did this. And on paper, walking into this, Sam Darnold's giving you a lot more to work with at this point than Geno Smith was when he took over. Geno had been the backup for a couple of years, but he was still coming off a tenure that was less than stellar as a starter in the NFL and had not yet proven that he was back. Sam Darnold did it last year. We already did this. Like, all right, in the right circumstances, Sam Darnold can play you some pretty good quarterback, and maybe Seattle believes that they can still be the right circumstance, even though now it's Jackson Smith and Jigba and the Pips in the wide receiver room. It's an offensive line that needs a ton of work, and now is going to have a little bit less capital overall to devote to it, because you're going to have to spend somewhere on quarterback. And now if you're Sam Darnold, that's what they were banking on. But, Dad, then we get the report from Diana Rossini over the weekend that apparently the Pittsburgh Steelers are also going to be making an offer or expected to be making an offer to Sam Darnold in free agency. And while the Steelers have still Russell Wilson or Justin Fields to potentially re-sign the way we've heard all offseason, also saw a report from Adam Schefter today that apparently they're going to be in on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes potentially. It at least clouds the field of if you're Sam Darnold and you had both offers on the table and they were comparable from the Pittsburgh Steelers as presently constructed with the Seattle Seahawks old wide receiver one in DK Metcalf, George Pickens, an offensive line that's got some young pieces that you can maybe sell as promised there, or are you taking the Seattle offer where you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who looked like a wide receiver one last year. You've got a pair of young offensive tackles that, when healthy, are good, and an interior that needs a bunch of work, and a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak. Dad, which of those do you feel like is the more appealing situation for Sam Darnold at this point?
I mean, right now, Pittsburgh has more weapons with DK Metcalf, with Freiermuth, with Pickens. If Pickens ends up staying on the team, they have, I believe, they have a better running game than Seattle does. Both have O-line issues. I like the Pittsburgh defense. I think, quite honestly, I think Pittsburgh's a better situation right now. I know moves are still going to happen, but I think right now, I would say Pittsburgh has the better weaponry than Seattle does. Which Sam Darnold's price tag is just going to everybody. The thought that the market was softening for Sam Darnold, dude's in line for a payday. I mean, because you have basically, remind me if I'm forgetting anybody, the Jets, the Browns, Tennessee, the Giants, Seattle, and Pittsburgh all looking for quarterbacks. Now, Tennessee and Cleveland can take care of that in the draft because they're up near the top if they choose to go that route. Or they could choose to go a veteran as well. And of the quarterbacks available, I'll say again, we know the older ones and older and injured ones. The only one that you would be willing to give a longer-term deal to would be Sam Darnold. So it depends on the Jets and Pittsburgh, the two teams we're talking about. Do they want to go long-term with Sam Darnold, or do they want to go a short-term older quarterback and look for the future quarterback, or are you making an investment in Sam to be your quarterback? But back to your original question, I would say Pittsburgh, as constituted right now, would be the better place.
I think you're probably right. But if I had to predict and game this situation out, we just said Pittsburgh is not one that's usually spent a ton of money on outside free agents coming into their organization. Right. I could see Pittsburgh getting priced out, and you can already see the writing on the wall of, hey, have that report out there with Sam Darnold, oh, we didn't get him, and now it makes us signing Aaron Rodgers feel a little bit more palatable. That seems a lot more in line with what the recent decision-making post-Ben Roethlisberger has been at that position. And so if Pittsburgh went out and signed Sam Darnold, man, it would be a very cautious level of optimism, because with him and DK, you know there's a little bit of risk involved in paying guys that might be getting a little bit more than their actual skill set is worth, but it would represent a big swing in the way that Pittsburgh has not seen at some of those positions for a while. And we talked about the apathy that could be building out in Steel City based on the success they've had recently, which is good, not great. That could take a big jump if they make that swing. We'll talk about a couple of under-the-radar signings next on GoJo and Golic. Morning chat. We'll get to a couple of the under the radar signings from this weekend in the NFL. For a weekend that was decidedly over the radar, one of my favorites is now residing here in Southern California, potentially right down the street from me. But the chat this morning has picked up on something that I feel like we need to address. And thank you to everyone who watches on YouTube, the GoJo and Golic channel. Lori Busco writes in, Senior already graduating from the shoulder harness as dad recovers from his shoulder replacement surgery. Dad, I was also a little curious because the last time we checked in on this, the timeline sounded like it was much longer for you to be in the sling after your shoulder replacement surgery. Let me get, this is not some sort of clean out. This wasn't people going in and cleaning up floaters like my dad always talked about, where they go in and do a little rummaging around some of the ligaments. They hacked off the top of your shoulder, gave you a new one, and put it back in the socket. And how long were you supposed to wear the sling for again, Dad? And how long did you end up wearing it now in total?
I was supposed to wear it for 5 weeks, and I wore it for a week and a half.
Wow.
It feels good.
I thought you were good at math, Senior.
No. See, I'm getting ahead of the rehab. I can't externally rotate, to turn it out. I'm doing that with my good arm, which isn't that good actually. And I'm keeping it tight to my body. But it doesn't hurt as much. So I'm getting some extra rehab movement in, up and down and dangling it and twirling it around, but I'm keeping it close to my body. I'm getting ahead of the rehab. I think that's a positive. I look at that as a positive step to try and get back on the field.
Wow, Senior, you're a doctor too. This is incredible. You learn something new every day.
That was amazing.
Yes.
I thought Ben was the only one going through medical school out there, but it turns out my father, in his infinite wisdom, a man who did such a good job rehabbing his shoulders the first however many times that he wound up needing an entirely new one, and a man that at one point rehabbed his knee so well that now it no longer straightens out perfectly for him. It's why we call him the Rookie of the Year. Now you believe you're going to get a jump on your shoulder and it's going to somehow go better than all of those other past
Actually,
instances.
can we just, producers in the back, can you guys just clip this off? I'm gonna DM Chris and just get your doctor's email, and I'm just going to send them that little clip of you talking about how you only wore your shoulder harness for a week and a half. We just send it to them, they'll be okay with it, right?
My first doctor visit is Wednesday, 2 weeks post-surgery. And you can bet I'll be wearing the sling to the doctor's office.
Oh, so unbelievable.
Wow.
Yes.
You are me going to the dentist's office, flossing for the week before the cleaning to try and see if I can just use that as a means to get through this appointment. You're going to lie to your doctor about your brand new shoulder.
I'm actually going to do this one better, because the knee, most of the surgeries I had is while I was still playing. So, while you're playing, you're treated like a thoroughbred horse. You're rehabbed, but, incredibly well. They want to get you back on the field, and you want to get back on the field. So rehabbing all the shoulder surgeries and the one knee surgery was fine when you have a team helping you go through it. Now, the second knee surgery I had was post-playing career, and you are right. I did not rehab that one well, and I cannot straighten my leg out. That was a mistake by me. So that's why I'm getting ahead of the shoulder rehab. I'm starting the movement early. I'm going to tell the doctor that I have not been wearing the sling as much, just to see what he says. If he's adamant about me wearing the sling, I'll think about it. If he says, hey, that's fine. If you have some movement, you can go ahead. I'll give you a little bit of leeway. Then I'll kind of gauge it on what he says and then do what I want.
Is it really uncomfortable? Like, why are we not wearing it?
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable.
Oh.
I feel if I'm moving it, I'm progressing. That's what I feel.
Oh, that's what your heart is telling you?
I'm not externally rotating. I'm allowed to move it. I'm allowed to move the arm. I was allowed to move the arm 3 days post-surgery, take the sling off and move the arm. So that's what I'm doing. I just don't put the sling back on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes so much sense, Senior. Really.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Perfect sense.
That's boy math,
when,
I guess.
When there's something else uncomfortable that guys decide not to wear, you end up with a baby you don't plan for sometimes. And while you'll be able to avoid that here at the what? Whoa, I'm sorry. We can't talk about how babies are made on this show here. Wear condoms.
No. We can do whatever we want.
That's the comparison? That's the comparison we're gonna make?
It's what you sounded like. Oh, it doesn't feel good.
It's
I don't like the way it feels when
Yeah.
I just want to be closer to you, baby. Like, it's just ridiculous. So I just look at this.
God.
You know what? Jesse said bookmark this to send to your doctor. I want to bookmark this now for posterity. When eventually, all of a sudden, something happens here and Dad's got a setback with the shoulder that we all could have seen coming, mark this clip down so that none of our sympathy is necessary, because you are just working yourself perfectly into the stubborn old man archetype right now by going and believe you know better than the doctors. And you talk about having a thoroughbred team around you here. You've got great doctors out there at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. You've got a team full of people at a facility that trains young and upcoming professional athletes that is going to help do your rehab for you. You could not have a better team of people that know how to do this process that you are just deciding you know better than you do right now.
Listen, I know my body, my choice. Okay.
Oh yeah, I was waiting for that one. Yeah.
Oh God, we knew it was coming.
Stay
All right,
off our shoulders. Yep, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. Jesse, why don't we talk about an older athlete who is taking the right care of his body and was just handsomely rewarded by a team in Los Angeles for it, while my dad continues to go over here and do his little shoulder movements, raw dogging without the harness.
He's like doing a little, yeah. Devontae Adams, going to LA. So the Rams are signing him to a 2-year deal here. Guys, good for Matthew Stafford, giving him another weapon in this revamped offense. Like, what kind of an impact do you think he can have on the Rams? And then also follow up, what does this mean for Cooper Kupp? ?
Yeah, I mean, Dad, Cooper Kupp is going to have a home this offseason, right? We talked about Buffalo still needs wide receiver help. You could see plenty Pittsburgh, potentially how things end up shaking up with George Pickens going forward. Again, we'll talk to Matt Harmon in like 15 minutes, who's really dialed into the wide receiver position and can hopefully give us some prognostication there. But here, this was basically just, hey, we want our older wide receiver on the team to have been a little less recently injured and also a little bit less of a cap hit this year. And, Dad, that's the real big win. Cooper Kupp had 2 years left on his contract with the Los Angeles Rams. He was going to be almost a $30 million cap hit in 2025 and a $27.3 million cap hit in 2026. For Devontae Adams now, this deal he signed is it's a 2-year deal, but it's ostensibly a 1-year, $20 million deal. The way that you look at this, he got a $12 million signing bonus, and his $8 million base salary next year is fully guaranteed. So he's got that coming. But he's a $14 million cap hit this next season in Los Angeles before that jumps to 30. So he's cheaper in the first year. He only costs you $6 million against the cap if you cut him after this year. So if Stafford retires after this season, if things go horribly wrong, you can get out from under this pretty easily, and it's not costing you nearly as much money as Cooper Kupp was going to at the same role, more or less, this season with the Rams. So this really seems to be, as simply put, what that move was about, is getting your old receiver to cost a little bit less during this next season when you're trying to go after the championship.
Yeah, as a trade-off. I mean, Puka Nacua is the number one receiver, and really you have a 1B in Devontae Adams, just like you had a 1B in Cooper Kupp. Another one of the biggest differences, because Devontae Adams is actually older than Cooper Kupp. Devontae's 32, Cooper Kupp is 31. But Devontae Adams is coming off 5 straight years of 1,000 yards receiving, the last being partly with the Raiders and partly, obviously, with the Jets. 3, I think, games with the Raiders and 11 with the Jets, I think, somewhere in there. But he had over 1,000 yards, and he had 1,000 yards the previous 4 seasons, the last 2 in Green Bay and the first 2 with the Raiders. Cooper Kupp, the last 3 years, has played 12 games, and 9 games. So he's missed 10 and 8. He's missed 18 games in the last 3 years. And we knew he was unbelievably great. He was just stunning how much we were like, how does he continue to get open? How does he continue to get open? And then injuries just absolutely derailed him. So you're right. He'll have a home somewhere without question. But Davante Adams, I could see still productive, still 1,000-yard receiver, split the cap in half, 28 to 30 million for Kupp and 14 mil for Davante Adams, and still a 1,000-yard receiver. So it was twofold. You get a healthier receiver and a big cap reduction.
And now if you're looking at this, I know the Philly contingent that works on our shows didn't love this signing because it feels like a good one. Davante Adams feels like a guy who's going to fit in well with Sean McVay and what they want to do offensively. But also, Dad, I saw Jordan Rodriguez, who does a great job covering the Rams for The Athletic, say this kind of clears the way now as we do get into legal tampering and actual free agency for the Los Angeles Rams to go and fortify the trenches, this area where they already traded away Jonah Jackson, they re-signed Alaric Jackson, but it still feels like there's work to be done because when you've got that position group solidified like you did 2 years ago, this offense can really hum, and the defense made great strides last year. And, Dad, with the Seahawks doing what they've done so far this offseason, it does feel like the NFC West right now is the Los Angeles Rams to lose based on the talent they're bringing back and what they've added here.
Completely agree. Seattle, hell, they're down 2 receivers and a quarterback. I mean, they have taken a major, and we know they're going to fill the slots. It's just going to be with who? Arizona, we kind of still can't figure out, but don't think they're ready to take that jump. And San Francisco is, has an injured player coming back in Ayuk, an injured player coming back in McCaffrey, traded away Debo. So they're a different team as well. I agree. It's the Rams as long as they straighten up that offensive line, and that's such a young defense. It is definitely their division to have.
They're one of the most talented teams in the NFL, and we know the risk of injury is certainly there at a couple of key spots. And Davante Adams is an old wide receiver, and that skill set can sometimes leave you in a hurry at that position in particular. But I don't know, Dad, it just doesn't feel like it with that group. And so of that tier of free agent signings, we talk about some of the veterans who are available, and he's going to be joined by Joey Bosa, who was let go, Tyler Lockett, who was let go. He's probably at the highest end of that. Wouldn't you agree?
Who, Davante, you saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you got Joey Bosa, like you said, available. You got Khalil Mack available, which is amazing. The Chargers gave up their wide receivers last year and kept their edge rushers, and this year they got rid of both their edge rushers, and only replaced a wide receiver with a rookie last year and struck gold in Ladd McConkey. So you kind of wonder where the Chargers are going to go. But yeah, I mean, I think Metcalf to the Steelers. Now they're in a more difficult division, right? DK Metcalf going to Pittsburgh with Baltimore and with Cincinnati. Cincinnati, you think Cincinnati's going to get better. They have the offensive firepower, but that defense is still up in the air. Cleveland we're not putting there. But I think the Rams, with Seattle depleted now, waiting to see how they refill the coffers. Arizona, we don't think is ready to make the jump. And so many question marks with San Francisco. I think Pittsburgh is definitely, without question, in the more difficult division than Davante Adams now with the Rams.
Yeah, a huge win from that standpoint, to your point, in terms of the overall quality of the division. Now, the 49ers could be a team maybe not as far off as we think. Injury was a huge part of what happened last year with that team that still has a ton of talent depth, even if it's going to take a hit when they re-sign the quarterback here. But again, now as we see musical chairs for veterans around the league, and it will be interesting how all that movement affects a guy like Trey Hendrickson, who's still one of the biggest names hanging out in the balance that could change teams among the non-free agents that get set to go this week. Dad, who's the signing that you're most looking forward to or interested in that regard to see next?
Well, I think it's a quarterback, right? I think it's Sam Darnold. Where is he going to go? Is he going to go to Pittsburgh? Is he going to go to Seattle? Where is Aaron Rodgers going to go? Is Kirk Cousins going to go somewhere? I think eventually the quarterback dominoes have to start. And again, the only younger one with a longer career ahead of him who played well last year, save for the last 2 games, is Sam Darnold. So I think it's the quarterback position on who kind of fills their slot, and whoever gets Sam Darnold, is it a long-term deal that says you're the quarterback of the future for this team?
Couldn't agree more. It was Stafford first. Now we wait on Darnold as legal tampering begins. Coming up next, we'll explore some of these wide receiver trades and who did get the biggest benefit out of their new move with Matt Harmon in hour number 2 next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's do that hockey. Alexander Ovechkin over the weekend scored his 886th career goal into an empty net for a 4-2 Washington Capitals win over the Seattle Kraken. Now this goal moves Ovi within just 9 of Wayne Gretzky's record. His 33rd goal of the season was also his 1,600th career point. It was Ovechkin's 8th empty net goal this season. And he also extended his NHL record for most career empty net goals with a whopping 65. Stay tuned for hour 2 of GoJo and Golic. Coming up, we'll welcome in Nat Harmon.
All right, hour number 2 of GoJo and Golic here. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. Very excited to talk to a guest that is going to make us better, smarter about so many of the things that are happening, especially in the wide receiver market right now in the NFL. But I got a confession. If you're listening to the hour number 1 portion of GoJo and Golic, wherever you get it, podcast, YouTube, the otherwise there, I apologize for whatever you heard in the last 5 minutes of the end of that hour, because I had no idea what was going on. I had blacked out because I thought I was going to poop my pants live on air here. I want to call it what it was. That was as scared and desperate to get away from this seat as I had ever seen. And my father, the only person on this set who has actually wiped my ass at any point in my life, knew that look of despair in my eyes and knew what time it was as I was desperately lobbing the ball back to him to talk so that I wouldn't lose concentration and then lose control of my bowels here in this chair.
I was going to text you, just go, and I'll finish the segment because I knew you had all the telltale signs of squirming, of moving, of sweating that you know pretty much everybody has gone through in life at some point. So yeah, I could definitely tell. And like I said, next time just go. Just go. They'll put the one shot on me, or they'll put Jesse up, and we'll finish the segment.
Thankfully, it didn't come to that. thankfully cooler heads prevailed, and now I'm a better, newer me. And now have to sheepishly welcome in a wonderful next guest here. You guys check him out. Football writer and analyst for Yahoo, doing a great job covering fantasy, all manners of football over there. You can hear him with our buddy Nate Tice over there talking, doing a great job. And also the architect of reception perception, a great tool for studying wide receiver play around the NFL, which is why I wanted to talk to him today. Matt Harmon, kind enough to join us here. Matt, I'm sorry you had to see me like this on the way in. What's going on, man?
No, you know what? I feel looser. I feel better. I feel very thankful that I have unloaded a long time ago before coming on the show. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be talking to my two favorite subjects, elimination and wide receivers.
Wow. What an information-filled segment.
I was going to say, now everyone listening to this segment knows that Matt and I have pooped today, and now we can proceed accordingly because this is a grown show that values healthy bowel movements and also values wide receiver play. So, Matt, for everyone that doesn't know, reception perception, incredible. You do an outstanding job of studying the wide receiver position, and I thought, especially with the DK Metcalf trade, I was fascinated because this was something that was on your radar, that he would potentially not be wearing a Seattle Seahawks uniform going into this season. What are the Pittsburgh Steelers getting at this point in the career of DK Metcalf? And is it worth the 5 years at $30 million plus a year that they're going to be paying him upcoming?
Yeah, it's a great question all the way around. I mean, I think number one, the biggest thing that's interesting here is, like you said, this was on my radar even before the reports kind of started to come out that this might happen early on here, because I think there was some strife between Seattle and DK Metcalf, not just because of the contract, but I also think there was some frustration with Metcalf's role last year in Ryan Grubb's offense in particular, because Metcalf is an interesting player. I think it's easy to always harken back to the size and speed, right? You know, he's 6'4", he runs the 4.3. It's always just possible to imagine, like, what if he took that next step? And I think early on last season, he really looked like he was, and producing like he was taking that next step. In the first 4 weeks of the season, he was fourth in receiving yards behind only Nico Collins, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, like truly elite company. But then from weeks 5 to 18, he finishes the year in the same ballpark as, like, ironically, his new teammate, George Pickens, and Quentin Johnston, which is just a perfect encapsulation of DK Metcalf's career. There's been these big peaks and valleys where sometimes he looks like an elite receiver, sometimes he looks like, one of the more volatile X receivers in the league. So I think the Steelers are getting somewhere, like a player somewhere in that giant cavern. Now, I think he's a really good starting X receiver in the league. I don't think he's necessarily in an ideal situation, a true, we throw him the ball 150 times a year, number one type of receiver. But I do like his fit in this offense with Arthur Smith running a lot more like in breakers off of play action, as opposed to kind of that static route tree that he had with Ryan Grubb last year, where it's a lot of goes and curls, which kind of leans into, I think, the worst part of his games.
So they potentially have a 1 and 1A in DK and in George Pickens. George Pickens certainly has his issues, sometimes motivation on the field, a bit of a character as well. But he's 6'3", Metcalf 6'4", Pickens makes big plays. Do you expect both those guys, by the way, one of them has to give up the number 14, do you expect both those guys to be lined up for the Steelers this year?
Well, I mean, if they are both going to be on the team, I definitely think we're missing an opportunity if we don't live stream, the brawl for the rights to wear number 14. I think the Steelers are missing a little bit of a broadcasting opportunity there. But I actually am not 100% convinced that Pickens is on this roster this year. I've talked to a lot of people, that have ties to the organization and know people in the organization that kind of expressed there's a lot of frustration with Pickens at this point. I really don't think there's like you need to be an insider to know that, or anybody connected here, because you can just see that there's been like a tumultuous journey between player and team throughout the course of his time there. Again, very, very similar, but maybe more dramatic than Metcalf. He has these really high peaks where he looks like, again, he could be taking that next step. Early in the year when he was playing with Justin Fields, I thought his film, via reception perception, like in isolation, was looking like the best of his career. I mean, in terms of him separating against press man coverage, he looked like he was taking that step to be a true number one receiver. But then we get to the midpoint of the season and he's kind of loafing through routes again. He's not fully engaged with the process. The separation starts coming down. He then picks up an injury. He kind of finishes the year on a weird note. That's just been the journey with the Steelers and George Pickens so far. So I actually think, because I don't think the team wants to give him a new contract after this year, and his rookie year deal is up. And because now they have Metcalf, I think there's even less of an incentive to invest in two wideouts that are kind of samey in a way. And because I think his skill set is still valuable enough as a true starting X receiver in the league that can beat press coverage and win at the catch point. I think some team will be willing to dangle a draft pick and potentially take him away by the time the draft kicks off here.
Would be very interesting to watch this game of musical chairs continue and what Pittsburgh's role in that's going to be. I do want to look on the other side of this, where DK Metcalf left, Jackson Smith-Njigba, now the lone remaining of the wide receiver trio that was the sell for this offense for the last couple of years. DK Metcalf traded, Tyler Lockett released. Is Jackson Smith-Njigba ready to be the focal point of this offense now the way this room's going to be reorganized?
I mean, we kind of already saw it happen last year, which is why I think Metcalf, there might have been even more frustration with just his role. Again, beyond the frustration with wanting to be paid what the Steelers are now paying him and the Seahawks were not willing to go there. I think, again, another reason why they might not have been willing to go there is that when they turned the reins over to Jackson Smith-Njigba as the wide receiver one on that team, he responded with incredible production. From weeks 10 on, he averaged 4.56 yards per route run against man coverage, which led all wide receivers with a significant portion of routes over the course of the back half of the year. And that's really the strength to me, Mike, of him as a prospect, is that he was a guy that could line up in the slot and obviously win against zone coverage and give you a lot of the separation ability on layup routes. But he was the best man coverage beating receiver in that draft class in 2023. And when you can get a guy who can line up in the slot, also line up at flanker for you, and obviously beat zone coverage, that's great, but also be a true man coverage winner on critical down and distances in the intermediate area, which is what I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is. You can funnel a really efficient passing offense through that type of player. So they clearly need to add more bodies around JSN. This is a room that is in serious turnover besides him. But I do think they can be pretty comfortable saying, like, hey, this is the guy who's going to come in here and we're going to funnel most of our passing offense through him.
So he had DK Metcalf traded for, Deebo Samuel traded for, Devontae Adams cut by the Jets so he could sign with another team before the league year started March 12th. Cooper Kupp available in a trade, and if not, they'll probably release him. As far as actual free agents who are available on the 12th, Chris Godwin has to lead the way, right? I mean, and he has to wait till the 12th to sign, though you can start legal tampering today. Where is his ceiling as far as money? 3 years, the last 3 years, not last year. He dislocated an ankle week 7, I believe. 3 years previous, 1,000-yard receiver, always kind of playing in the shadow of Mike Evans. But 29 years old, still, I think, a quality wide receiver. He's got to be the highest valued free agent out there, correct?
Oh, I think significantly. And even though he is coming off a serious injury, it's worth noting that I think he was having the best season of his career prior to that injury. Obviously, from a production standpoint, he was right up there. But in the 7 games that he was available, they're all charted for reception perception. They actually launched on the site this morning if people want to check those out. I posted the route graphics on my Twitter page as well. He was averaging a career high 75 point, or not a career high, but the highest since like kind of his peak, 75.2% success rate versus man coverage, and an actual career high 83.7% success rate versus zone. Those will push like some of the best numbers for any receiver charted last season, beyond like the truly elite tier. And that's what makes Godwin such a fascinating player, is because I think I'm tempted to say he's like the best number 2 receiver in the league. He's one of those guys there. There's obviously a host of players that you can pick from, but he's so quarterback friendly, right? He can, again, get you easy separation underneath, but he can also be a monster in the intermediate area. He had a 96% success rate in the games I charted on out routes. Baker Mayfield loves to throw those out routes, and that was something that Liam Cohen really installed into the offense this year that, was a big part of what Dave Canales did with Mike Evans the year prior. Like, let's get him running on more out routes than we've ever seen from Mike Evans previously, because Baker loves to throw those out routes to the side, to the condensed side of the field. It's just really an area where he's comfortable working. Well, why not also get our other really good receiver working more from the slot and also running those out breaking routes? And we saw a lot of success there. So I think that Godwin was really activated last year, both as a receiver, but he brings so much in the blocking game too. Like, he might be one of the 2 or 3 best blocking receivers in the league. And this is a team in Tampa Bay that still wants to keep a great run game going from last year, even though they are changing over offensive coordinators once again. I have a tough time imagining Tampa Bay just letting him walk out the door. He seems like a guy that, is a Bucs lifer. But at the same time, like you said, Mike, he's easily, I think, the best receiver on the market now at this point. He's still a guy that you can squint and say, okay, he's coming off an injury, but he's probably still in the prime of his career, which stands out when there's guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Stephon Diggs and, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen available in free agency. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get news at some point today that some team has really just blown him away with a big offer. But, man, he would be a huge loss and a tough guy to replace for Tampa Bay.
Only a couple minutes left here, but you mentioned youth in the wide receiver market right now, hard to come by. Most of the names that we've been talking about have been veterans and older players. Of the 2 that are signed, one was a trade, one was a sign, of Devontae Adams now with the Los Angeles Rams and Deebo Samuel heading to Washington with the Commanders. Which of those do you like better as a fit that could see real big production this upcoming season?
Yeah, I actually like both guys as a fit. I pointed out the Commanders as the Deebo team or my favorite spot for him to potentially land in prior to the move. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. But in terms of what the guy I'm convinced has more left, it's definitely Devontae Adams over Deebo Samuel. Now, I'll give the caveat here that over the 11 to 12 years now, I've been working with reception perception and charting the film and just kind of watching guys throughout the course of their career. I think the hardest thing to predict, even using a methodology like this, is wide receiver age curves and age cliffs, because we see some guys, and I was harking back to like Des Bryant in his final year with the Dallas Cowboys, like all of his success rates versus man, zone, press, they all just fell off the cliff. He was cut by the Cowboys, and despite, every major network talking about it 24/7, he wasn't signed until November, where he tore his Achilles with the Saints and obviously really never came back from that. So sometimes you see that dramatic cliff. Allen Robinson with the Los Angeles Rams is another auspicious one that happened as well. Like there was just a quick cliff there and he never really recovered to being a high volume player. Other guys age gracefully. Like Keenan Allen, I think is a player that has been in decline for several seasons, but has still been able to be a quality high volume player with the Chargers in his final year and a pretty okay, role player, even if he was maybe overstretched a little bit with the Bears last year. So, and I think that's always reflected in the reception perception data. The problem is just like, what is the next year product going to look like? For Devontae Adams, though, again, I think you see signs of a potential graceful decline here, even if, again, he is certainly a player in decline. We're talking about a guy that is, I think you could argue, the best receiver of the reception perception era, which is 2014 to current. Wow. He has 3 seasons in the top 10 in success rate versus man coverage, 2 seasons over the 95th percentile in success rate versus zone. His 2021 season, which you can argue is probably the best in my database, is the 3rd best success rate versus press coverage score of all time. However, we've seen a dip from that player, but all of his numbers last year still look like a guy who could be a solid X receiver in the league. So I do really like this signing for the Rams, both in how he can be used and how he complements Puka Nacua as well.
More great information like this at Yahoo Sports, receptionperception.com. Matt, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's talk a little NBA. So on Saturday night, the Celtics took down the Lakers 111-101. So fellas, what'd you like from the Celtics in this one? Are they the clear-cut best team in the NBA? I mean, Jason Tatum put up 40. Incredible.
No.
No. Oh, the Cavaliers.
No.
Oh, my
Look what-
Cleveland
look what you did.
Cavaliers.
I know.
Okay.
See?
Go ahead, Senior.
And I
Jesse,
know.
you
I looked at the rundown. We'll get to the Cavs. They're always and there was in other games in the NBA, and that's when my Cavs, who played Milwaukee, not a slouch team at all. We'll talk about them, with the 30 seconds to go in the show. We'll just mention the Cavs. But listen, this for the Celtics, all kidding aside, that third quarter display of defense that they had against the Lakers was incredible. It's a 4-point game at halftime. Boston outscored LA 29-13 in the third quarter. I mean, just absolutely annihilated them. They're just so strong everywhere. They really are. And that's nothing new for Boston. They're going to be in it. They're going to be fighting Cleveland to get to the finals. This really is more about LA because the headline of this game after the third quarter was the Lakers made a bit of a run, only lost by 10, but it was LeBron James hurting his groin. By the way, that's the only injury that injury has kept him out the longest in his career. He had a groin injury. I forgot what year it was, but he missed 17 games with a groin injury, and he hurt his groin on the court and walked right into the locker room after he tried to stretch it a little bit on the sideline. They'll say he'll miss maybe a week or two, and let me tell you, they better hold off until he is completely healthy. They play 6 games in the next 8 days. He's going to miss all of those games. They're only a couple of games from they're tied in second in the conference now with Denver. They're like 2 games away from being 5th in the conference. So I have a feeling they're going to drop Luka Doncic holding his back, looking older than his 25 years of age. So the Lakers all of a sudden are going to have some issues.
Yeah, it was all good just a week ago, and now, to your point, the stretch coming up too, 2 games apiece against Denver and Milwaukee, so some good teams and some good matchups in the mix while LeBron James going to be sidelined. Dad, you're right. This is the soft tissue injuries you talk about all the time for a player that's over 40 years old and who did have recent history where this was something that sidelined him severely. This is the chief worry for you because with this Lakers team, because the setup is flawed with how they are structured overall. You would have loved a big man. We know why it didn't happen at the trade deadline. And so you rely so heavily on the playmaking ability of your 2 forwards and Luka Doncic and LeBron James, however you classify Luka, I should say. Playmaker and offensive initiators. Now that that's down to just Luka, who you mentioned. We had worries about the calf coming in. Now the back starts getting held up here. Down the stretch of the season when they've been pushing this hard for this long. And, Dad, this was my one real concern because what you heard the rallying cry was from J.J. Redick during this was effort, right? He said, as long as I've been around this league and now getting to coaching it this first year, the real difference night in and night out is can you get effort out of your roster at a time of year where others don't want to? The problem is when your roster's older, especially at the important leadership position LeBron James offers, this is the potential outcome that could befall you before you get to the important games in the postseason.
And listen, LeBron, they've played 62 games. LeBron has played 58 of them. 58 of them at 40 years old. He's averaging over almost 52% from the field, 8.5 assists, a little over 8 rebounds, 25 points a game. And he's having an incredible year. He's 40. And now with the injury, coming back from that and dealing with the postseason, that's a lot. That is going to be a lot on his shoulders. So it's a great run. We'll see what they can salvage or where they are by the time they're as close to full strength, and by that I mean having Luka and LeBron back out on the court at the same time, of just where they are in the standing. Because sitting in the 2 seed would be a nice slot. That means you wouldn't face SGA in Oklahoma City until the conference finals, which is a position you'd like to be in. But I don't know if they're going to be in that position, even with LeBron. I mean, Denver's right there. As you mentioned, they face him twice when LeBron won't be on the court. I know they've beaten Denver since Luka's been there. But it's going to be interesting where they are when LeBron comes back.
Yeah, and I just think This is probably healthy in terms of recalibrating where we're at with the Lakers at this point. While they were, yes, the 2 seed in the Western Conference, it didn't necessarily feel like that was sustainable over the long run when you looked at the quality of teams that they were potentially chasing and how much effort it took to stay here. And so, Dad, that could be a better way to handicap this going forward, because it is. There's such a sizable gap between Oklahoma City and everybody else. It's going to be about just the timing of when that matchup comes for all the Western Conference contenders. A late season injury like this, for what you could still argue on his best day is the most important player on that team with a healthy Luka Doncic, maybe finally now pushing LeBron out of that spot. This, to my mind, severely impacts anything I thought the Lakers were capable of in the postseason and drops my expectation probably back down to where they should have been all along, which is this Luka Doncic move is about the future. This year was going to be a nice bonus, however it worked out, but this is also the reminder of what you are battling against from here on out and why we've spent so much bandwidth talking about LeBron's minutes over the last couple of years, because as long as this is looming in the distance, at any time that tire can go flat on you on the highway if you're the Lakers and completely derail your season.
Yeah, it seems like we're leaning more toward a Oklahoma City and Denver Western Conference final matchup. By the way, how lucky are we? We get 2 straight nights or 2 straight days of Denver and Oklahoma City. They played yesterday, of which SGA puts up 40. Oklahoma City takes out Denver, and they play again tonight. So back-to-back games, which is pretty cool. But I think that's more a window of what the Western Conference final is going to be. While there are those out, the Laker fans and LeBron fans, that hope the Lakers could make this run, I just think ultimately it's going to be too much for them.
Yep, you mentioned SGA continues to put some distance between himself and the rest of the field in the MVP race. It's barely worth a conversation at this point. Quite honestly, I'd be curious what it would take to unseed SGA from the MVP at this point in the season. And Dad, for them, we started off this segment talking about, oh, by the way, the Boston Celtics did get a quality win against this Lakers team, one that probably is better than the final score indicates. And that really still seems to be the collision course in most people's minds of what the 2 best teams in the NBA actually are. The Cleveland Cavaliers, yes, are going to have their day in court when it comes to that. But right now, I think most people, even you, analyzing this coherently, would say Oklahoma's been the best team in basketball all year. And we could all see this coming a mile away. You and I are no basketball experts by any means. And last spring, we're sitting around here when they went over and signed Isaiah Hartenstein and added them there with Chet and the rest of that young core in Oklahoma City and said, that seems like a team that after the experience they gained in last year's postseason is destined for an NBA Finals run, has all the things you want, and a lead dog playmaker, a bunch of guys on the perimeter like Jalen Williams and Lou Dort that'll do really well. The Twins got Twin Towers on the inside that we just mentioned. They're going to be there, and then the Celtics are on the other side with all the championship metal from last year that, albeit in an Eastern Conference that gave them a better path to the finals than most because of the injuries that the teams they face suffered, those 2 teams feel like the 2 best teams in the league at this point in time.
Yeah, I'll hold my thought on that for my Cavaliers to fight for the Eastern Conference Finals. But yeah, I get it. I'm just messing around. Boston looks to be looks like they are on the verge, or I think it'll be a great series with Cleveland, quite honestly. And it would be stunning if it's not those 2. It would have to be a massive upset of one of those teams for them not to be in the Eastern Conference Finals together. It'll be interesting the more of a question mark, though I would lean toward Denver. That'll be Denver with Oklahoma City. And you're right, Oklahoma City is just absolutely stacked right now. So it's the NBA does seem a bit top heavy right now.
I mean, listen, Dad, the Cavaliers have won 14 straight. Like, I don't want to diminish that accomplishment at all. And I feel like, in fairness to you, they get mentioned the exact right amount. They are talked about as one of the teams that people believe can actually win a championship. We largely view this as a 3-team race, and it's been Oklahoma City, Boston, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And considering one of those teams is the most talented in the NBA, the other's not far behind them and just won the championship. And then y'all, I do feel like that is a healthy amount of respect that you continue to manufacture into the chip on your shoulder.
Well, I hope so. I hope they get the respect. I mean, listen, they're gonna be able to prove it, right? I mean, the bottom line is it's going to be on the court. And they're going to be able to prove it. They move the ball so well, just so well, and they'll have their chance. They'll have their chance and Boston should be favored, or I'm sure will be favored until you knock off the defending champs. You know what? You're climbing the mountain. That's what Cleveland's doing. Boston was at the top of the mountain, and someone's got to knock them off. I hope it's my Cavaliers.
It is interesting in the Eastern Conference, though. Milwaukee now has a touch of that New York Knicks, and they even have lost to that New York Knicks team. Milwaukee now falls to 0-9 against the top three teams, that being Cleveland, Boston, and New York in the Eastern Conference. They opened up a string of 8 consecutive games, the Bucks do, against teams with a winning record coming up. And, Dad, it just continues to be interesting, the quiet around Milwaukee that's existed for most of this year. For so long, Giannis Antetokounmpo, a multi-time MVP, an NBA champion, appeared to be one of the guys that was up next. And that run at the top seemed short-lived. Dame Lillard finally gave him the running mate, and Dame Lillard the exit ramp from Portland that we had all wanted for so long. And it just hasn't materialized into the dominant stretch that we thought that might. In a way, again, they've been very good, but now them running into that same problem where we only feel like we can trust them but so much going into the postseason isn't where I think most people thought the trajectory of this career was going.
No, and you wonder if Giannis is going to start talking again, right? About wanting to go somewhere else, wanting to be gone. Are you trying to build a winner? And Milwaukee's made some moves, no doubt. But they can't crack the top 2, or the top 3. But New York, just like you mentioned, Milwaukee losing to the top teams. We have already, acknowledged that New York has lost to the top 3 teams, the top 2 in the East and the top in the West, and Oklahoma City either. So there's a clear-cut 3 teams in the NBA right now, and then it's everybody else. But that's going to be the talk. Is Giannis going to want out? As he starts his talk again, as they try and now have to overcome 3 teams, the Knicks, mainly though Boston and Cleveland.
Yeah, the runway is certainly there because I know everyone's gearing up this offseason. It seems like already we're loading up the cannon with Kevin Durant trade conversations, which we know a well-worn path in terms of NBA offseason discourse. We're all good at this. We got a lot of reps at this. The situation in Phoenix is clearly FUBAR in so many ways that seems obvious, but Kevin Durant, near the tail end of his career, Giannis, to your point, talking season is always important for a guy that has consistently held his franchise's feet to the flames, whether for his contract or to make a move for somebody else, saying, hey, I want to be a part of a winner, and if it ain't here, it ain't here.
Yeah. And with Durant, I mean, obviously it worked in Golden State, of which he got ripped more than praised for going and joining Golden State and winning a couple of titles and a couple of series MVPs. But then he goes to Brooklyn, and could have been the worst 3-star matchup there ever was. And then he goes to Phoenix, and it doesn't work. So you just wonder, you're moving a Kevin Durant piece somewhere. Is it really going to help? The last 2 places have been horrific results.
No doubt it's been horrific. So we will see what happens with the remainder of the Eastern Conference. But again, the news of the day, LeBron James sidelined for up to 2 weeks with a groin injury suffered in that loss to the Celtics. And again, just to keep in mind where LeBron James was at right now, averaging just over 25 points a game, 8.5 assists, and 8.1 rebounds. He is just one of 2 players, him and Nikola Jokic, to average at least those numbers this season. And when you look at his stat lines across the board, comparable to his 2012-13 MVP season, where he averaged just under 27, 8, and 7.3, shooting 56% of the field and 40 from 3. He's 51.2 from the field and 39% from 3 this season. So he's been sensational. It got even better when Luka Doncic showed up, and now that may all go by the wayside because at some point Father Time does rear his head, and it's at the worst possible time for the Lakers now.
And if you're looking at 2 weeks, that's going to be about 10 games. They have 20 games left. So that's if he can come back after a couple of weeks and try and get some play in before the playoffs. Or do you hold him out longer to make sure he's okay for the playoff run and obviously not care where you're seated, because a healthy LeBron is more important than a not healthy LeBron, but a higher seeded.
Absolutely, no doubt about it, as LeBron may be going to finish top 5 in MVP voting as a 40-plus-year-old. Absolute insanity from one of the best to ever do it. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Dad, as we now get ready for free agency coming up this season, or coming up this week, I should say, it's felt like it's already been going along with all the signings, trades, and everything that we've had. Actual free agency, legal tampering beginning today, free agency starting with the new league year on the 12th. It's probably worth recapping what we've already had on the table and who we actually have left to deal this offseason here. Because over the weekend, Dad, we've talked about some of the big moves that were already made. Josh Allen re-signing for a bigger deal in Buffalo, Myles Garrett re-signing after the offseason trade request from the Cleveland Browns to go along with the DK Metcalf trade and others. There's been a flurry of action so far. So do you have a brief rundown of what we've got there?
Oh, yeah. I have a brief rundown and times as of yesterday. 11:51 a.m., Myles Garrett agrees to an extension with the Browns. At 2:24 p.m., Nick Bolton re-signs with the Chiefs. 4:49 p.m., Aaron Jones re-signs with the Vikings. The 6 o'clock hour had a lot. 6:37 p.m., Ernest Jones IV re-signs with the Seahawks. 6:55, Devontae Adams signs with the Rams. 6:57, Harold Landry signs with the Patriots. 7:38, Josh Allen agrees to an extension with the Bills. And 7:49, DK Metcalf traded to the Steelers. So you want to talk about a one-day flurry of action, and that was before legal tampering could start, which starts today. So it's going to be crazy these next few days.
I do think in that bunch, one of the most impactful signings from over the weekend was Ronnie Stanley going back to the Baltimore Ravens. We've talked about this offensive line class and who's available. It's one where you're going to see some guard names that maybe the general public isn't as familiar with get a big payday, but Ronnie Stanley, especially on the perimeter class. And remember, this isn't a tackle class coming out of the NFL draft that's really well regarded. Most of the guys up top, I mean, one of the best ones you're talking about, Will Campbell, is getting talked about kicked into guard, and a lot of the top prospects have gotten that label on them. So this isn't last year where this ready-made army of great offensive tackle prospects you can pick up in the first round. So Ronnie was going to be a guy that I thought might command a lot of value. Baltimore bringing him back is the right move. It is the smart move for where this team is and the caliber of football that Ronnie was playing last year, Dad, which was Pro Bowl level football. And if he plays it again next year, he's probably going to be on the All-Pro team, because it usually takes that little bit of inertia after Ronnie gave it up with the injuries that unfortunately knocked him off that trajectory where I think he would have been a perennial All-Pro guy the way he was playing 3-4 years ago. That's huge for them. They're going to lose Pat McCarry, but that offensive line really settled in at the end of last season, and I would have been in no hurry to give up what I'd found there if I was Baltimore. So good on Eric DeCosta and that crew.
You know, you can never blame a player for injury, right? Injuries are going to happen. No. But you can certainly blame a player or praise a player for how they come back from injury. And boy, how Ronnie Stanley has come back, how he's rehabbed, how he's worked, how he's gotten himself back ready to go to reach just about Pro Bowl, All-Pro level again. And the timing award with the contract worked out great, because I thought his career was going to be year to year with the injuries that he had kind of on the field, off the field. But he has done a great job getting himself in shape, avoiding injury, which again is nobody's fault, and playing the way he's played. So I agree. That was a one where re-signing your own was a big thing.
Well, and remember, it was after he signed the deal last time was when the first major injury occurred. So he never really got to go and enjoy the fruits of his labor and be on the field, that consistency. So now it's why you go out and you hope all these guys get paid so that those guarantees kick in, because injury is the only thing that feels certain about this league. But now hopefully the stretch run coming up with the Ravens can continue to challenge for the Chiefs spot at the top of the AFC can be done with a healthy Ronnie Stanley in tow.
You know, and we talked about Zach Baun, the linebacker for Philadelphia, because he's on the Super Bowl winning team. He had an All-Pro year. He never had more in his 4 years in New Orleans. He never had more than like 36 tackles. Goes to Philly, has 150 tackles, leads the team, leads them to a Super Bowl, and signs a new deal. But there's a guy who not a lot of people are going to know. That congrats to him, Jamie Sherwood. And I'm sure there are a lot of people going, who? But real football people know who I'm talking about. He's a linebacker for the Jets. He had been a backup, Mike, for 3 years. Never had more than 46 tackles. C.J. Mosley goes down for the Jets. Jamien Sherwood takes over. Jamien Sherwood ended up with 158 tackles. He was the Jets MVP this year. And he was a 5th-round pick, so it was his 4th year, so it was the last year of his deal. Jets re-signed him 3 years, $45 million. This dude went from a 5th-round draft pick back up for his first 3 years, gets a starting job mostly because of injury, ends up one of the leading tacklers in the league, was the leading tackler in solo tackles, I believe, in the entire NFL, and gets rewarded for $15 million a year. Those are the stories. You know, this wasn't a high-value guy. This wasn't a name that came out of Auburn that you knew in the draft, again, a 5th-round pick, but just when he got his chance, man, he made the most of it.
And it kind of underscores a trend that I saw Nate Tice bring up yesterday, which is the fear in the off-ball linebacker market right now. Because you look, the Chiefs re-signed Nick Bolton. Ernest Jones gets re-signed in Seattle. You lump in this one with that, and with what we saw, Terrell Bernard re-signed by the Buffalo Bills. It's a very limited supply of quality players at that position. And what have we seen in recent years? Linebacker and defensive tackle matter a lot in a league that is going back more towards a downhill rushing attack that tried to take advantage of little guys that everybody drafted in the box. And so they're not perfect, but if you've got guys that are competent at that position, it seems like teams are bending over backwards to make sure they don't leave the building, because the prospects don't look much better anywhere else on the outside. So kudos to those guys, man. Off-ball linebacker, it's kind of been a conversation we haven't had as much as we have a position like running back that had been a glamour position in the NFL. But a big comeback for a lot of those guys in paydays that they've richly deserved. So, Dad, now as we stare out at true free agency that's getting ready to get started, we know Sam Darnold is the big domino that everybody is waiting to see fall. He may not be the best player left out there. ESPN.com, I think, lists DJ Reed, the free agent cornerback coming off his season with the New York Jets, as the top one available. But Sam Darnold, the most important. So if you're going to put on your prognostication hat, we talked about Seattle. Big risk in letting go of Geno Smith. Can't say I agree with the move, but they seem to be believing and hitching their wagon to Sam Darnold as their potential future hope. We also heard the Pittsburgh Steelers could be making an offer there, but Aaron Rodgers also in the mix for them. When it's all said and done, where do you think Sam Darnold signs by the time that move goes down as free agency begins?
I think Sam Darnold signs with either Seattle or Pittsburgh, and I would probably lean towards Seattle. I think there's going to be multiple teams going for Sam, so that's going to up the value. So unless they have a plan, like I said, the reports are they tried to re-sign Geno on a short deal between 40 and 45 mil. Geno didn't want that, so wanted out, and they pulled off the trade pretty quickly, quite honestly. So a lot of it depends on, is Seattle, is Pittsburgh, are they whoever signed Sam Darnold, because he's, again, the youngest and had really the best year of the compared to the aging quarterbacks and injured quarterbacks that are available. Will he be signed to a long-term deal as that team's future? Because he hadn't been. It wasn't that deal in Carolina. Certainly wasn't that deal as a backup in San Francisco. Absolutely wasn't the deal in Minnesota on a one-year deal. That's no faith in being the quarterback of the future. So now, is he given that chance? Is the reclamation project gone far enough to where he gets, say, a 4-year or more deal that says you're the quarterback of this team? That I don't know if it happens. That I don't know if it goes beyond 3 years. But I do think it'll be either Seattle or Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be a prorated deal like that we saw in New York for Daniel Jones, where a lot of it's front loaded, but you're probably talking about numbers comparable to what Geno wanted. And if you're Seattle, I guess the way you justify it is you would rather pay for a younger quarterback at that same number that you feel like is still a risk at that position, even though I think Geno had showed you a lot in adverse circumstances. And Sam Darnold, what we saw was his best pitch in ideal circumstances. What you had in that situation all across the board in Minnesota was different and better than what he's going to be afforded in Seattle. Will he be able to produce those same results? It certainly seems like he's trending in that direction, and I agree. I think right now Darnold to Seattle feels like the move. All right, let's finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Watch us Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the GoJo and Golic YouTube channel. Subscribe and hit the bell over there. Thank you to Matt Harmon, Yahoo Sports writer and analyst covering the NFL. Also, the creator of Reception Perception, receptionperception.com, where you can get all of his great study and analysis on the wide receivers, for joining us and talking about Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, and all the other movement this offseason. You missed that. You can check it out wherever you get our pod or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's start off with this. Juju Watkins, the star women's basketball player at USC, is on a historic pace right now, has already, through the first 2 seasons of her career, overtaking Caitlin Clark as the NCAA's all-time leading scorer for a woman scoring points in the first 2 years of her career. Now, it comes, unfortunately for USC and Juju Watkins, in a loss to rival UCLA in the Big Ten tournament, Dad, as USC had swept them during the regular season. UCLA gets the last laugh in the Big Ten tournament, as they're now both Big Ten foes, which still takes a lot of getting used to. But there's been no doubt, Dad, she has been the subject of the Nike campaigns with them. I've seen her on billboards 20 stories high in Southern California. She feels like it and now in women's college basketball, and is going to be one of the stars to watch in the tournament coming up.
It does seem odd, UCLA and USC playing for the Big Ten championship. That's just, though in this day and age, I guess not as crazy as you would think. Yeah, Juju Watkins, I mean, that's how we're talking about Caitlin Clark and what she's done all time, and now Juju Watkins 2 years in is on pace to beat that. That's just absolutely amazing, and just goes to how great the women's game has gotten. By the way, the Wooden Award top 15 national semifinalists are out, and it is basically led by Conference Players of the Year. Paige Beckers, Big East Player of the Year. She's up for Juju Watkins, Big Ten Player of the Year. Hannah Hidalgo, Big East Player of the ACC Player of the Year. Madison Booker, SEC Player of the Year from Texas. And Haley Van Lith, the Big 12 Player of the Year from TCU. Now, Hannah Hidalgo and Notre Dame, they're certainly slipped a little as of late. Losing later on in the season a couple of times. Juju Watkins, like you said, coming in a loss to UCLA, couldn't sweep UCLA 3 times. And Paige Beckers is the Big East Player of the Year for the 3rd time. I mean, her coming back from injury and what she's done. So it seems the top 3 are Beckers, Juju Watkins, and Hannah Hidalgo. But boy, oh boy, what a class of women and a class of teams, a deep set of teams that could possibly win the title.
I was going to say Haley Van Lith not gotten the press that the others have, nearly making that move down to TCU, but I think that's their first Big 12 championship in conference history. Now, we know there are some notable absences from that, including Madison Booker's Texas team that now reside in the SEC, but regardless, that's an incredible feat. A player that we've all known and seen play a lot of high-level basketball, getting ready to lead a hot team into the tournament to go along with the rest of that group. I need Jesus and some help after this weekend. The Notre Dame women lose to Duke in the ACC tournament. The Notre Dame men lose another lacrosse game this past weekend to an Ohio State team that, man, I was counting on these dudes getting the revenge for the national championship. I can take, to an extent, us losing to Ohio State in football, knowing the realities of those situations. But good God, I was really ready to talk my stuff with the lacrosse team, and instead, Notre Dame loses another one after a 1-2 tilt against Maryland the other weekend. Thank God the hockey team decided to upset Minnesota and continue their run here in Jeff Jackson's final year in South Bend. So I need a lot of help. Jesse, we need a lot of help transitioning, so why don't we go to that? What do we have next?
Yeah, okay, let's talk game-worn jerseys. Okay, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant have some game-worn jerseys that are set to be auctioned off. Could bring in a pretty penny. It's saying here they could fetch up to $20 million. I mean, I can see why people would pay that for these. Is there anything you'd pay that much for? Like, would you, if you had the cash, would you spend it on these? We talked about the Cheeto last time that we would not be willing to spend the money on, but maybe one of these game-worn jerseys that are a part of history.
Yeah, they're first game jerseys, game-worn first game jerseys of Jordan and Kobe. $20 million. I mean, again, you have to have stupid money to be able to buy that, as opposed to the $87,000 for the
Cheetozard.
Pokemon-shaped
Cheetozard.
Cheetozard.
Yeah, which
please call it
ridiculous.
by its proper name.
Yeah, whatever. $20 million. I mean, I had thought the kind of the memorabilia world had somewhat slipped. I know it has in baseball for like home run balls or significant baseballs, but jerseys. Boy, oh boy, 20 mil. Those are two heavy hitters, obviously, with the passing of Kobe Bryant years ago, which is just obviously still stunning, and Michael Jordan, two of the greatest to ever do it. That's a hefty price tag, though.
Yeah, but you're right. For these two, I kind of get it. To your point, anything Michael Jordan touched, especially early in his career, makes a ton of sense. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, with the passing of Kobe Bryant, everything associated with him becomes infinitely more valuable. I've never really understood it, though. Like, I and maybe just growing up and playing sports and such that way, and never really made me idolize merchandise or want to spend. Now, I've never had $10 million to spend on anything, and to the point we always make, if you're spending $10 million on a game-worn jersey, it's likely because $10 million really ain't a damn thing to you. That was just never part of the home decor set. I always wanted Dad to be able to hang the things that I had done athletic accomplishment-wise, and so our jerseys, my helmets from when I played here, all these things that, quite honestly, I harp on you because I don't think you have nearly enough of hung up outside of your home office that had a bunch of game balls that you had when I was a kid. That, to me, was always the appealing part, not hanging somebody else's accomplishments up in my house.
Yeah, I was more, me and your brother were more happier to hang up your guys' stuff than my stuff. Hell, your mother, when we cleaned out our house in Connecticut, threw all my high school awards away. We had a big trash thing in the driveway, and I went out to throw some stuff in there, and I look and see it. I see a lot of my high school trophies and plaques in there thrown away, and I'm like, "Hon, what's going on?" She's like, "Take a picture of them." She's like, "You really want to hang on to them?" And in all honesty, they just kind of sit in a box, though some were on the wall that I think she took off the wall and threw away. So I was, I'm not going to get in an argument with her about that. I'll pick my spots.
No greater rite of passage than the box full of stuff you kind of don't want to throw away, but really have no use for, moving from home to home as you go. Jesse, let's get to the third and finish off on a very hungry note.
Yeah, check out this video of Puka Nacua making an absolute feast with some tri-tip steak. Yeah, okay.
Today we're about to cook up the Wagyu tri-tip and the biggest dinosaur bones you've ever seen in your life.
Just look at that marbling. Lava is the binder.
Some of that cowboy butter.
And maple bourbon. Now throw it on the smoker.
I was definitely going for the top one.
Prep the bone marrow with olive oil, gravel, and throw it on the smoker. Fire, charcoal, fire starters, light them up.
Slab of ahi, boil it up. Salt on there, quick sear. Nice char on there.
see that grain right there? As a football player, they tell you always got to cut 90 degrees across the grain right here. This is how it's done. Woo.
Come on now, baby.
Cheers. The Wagyu tri-tip was absolutely amazing. Wow. Oh, here you go.
Yeah. Bone marrow was done. Tri-tip, ahi tuna, avocados. Eggs.
The berries? You got the blue ones? I don't even know what these are.
Honeycomb. Drizzle that over the top.
If you want to become an NFL player, get a lot of protein in you.
Oh, best beer I ever had. Steak, bone marrow, avocado. Pop this yolk. Put some of that egg yolk on too.
Wow, that looked really good.
Wow.
I also
Yeah, that'll do
appreciate the ASMR sounds. They're like slapping the meat around and like making all that was funny.
I was gonna say I did not. Well, my antennas were up on this when Matthew Stafford announced that he was re-signing with the Los Angeles Rams. Puka Nacua put out one of those Instagram influencer style reaction videos, and I was like, "Oh, is Puka doing content?" And this affirms it right now. My man has made the full switch from young star to content creator in a hurry.
And it's
That
good.
was good
I'll
content,
watch.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was all stuff I would eat. I would sit down at that table and destroy all that stuff. Man, my mouth's watering on that one. I'm going to go eat.
Yeah, no. An incredible show by Puka Nacua. Let me tell you what, Puka, if you're looking to collaborate on content, I know a guy whose car you can sit in and eat snacks anytime, any day, and probably lives a decent ways away from you because I imagine he lives in a way better neighborhood than I do based on our shared and relative income. But that being said, download, subscribe, rate, review this show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the DraftKings Network. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow without a